Good day everyone. Our lesson for today is Ministry of Foreign Affairs. What is Ministry of Foreign Affairs? It is a government department responsible for managing the international relations and diplomatic missions of the state. It is also responsible for helping and providing support to its constituents who are in abroad. Ministry of Foreign Affairs is headed by Foreign Minister, and Foreign Minister is considered as Secretary of the State and representative of the state in international relations. Sino si Cardinal Richelieu? So, Cardinal Richelieu established the first modern foreign ministry in France in 1626. He is also the pioneer of raison d'etat or national interest. So, sa diplomatic missions or sa diplomacy, which is negotiation, hindi mawawala ang national interest. Kasi nagkakaroon nga kayo ng negotiation para ma-promote yung national interest at ma-boost yung relationship between them. He created the Ministry of External Affairs, which manages the international relations of the state. Cardinal Richelieu believes that negotiation is a continuous process, na dapat daw ang diplomat should have one master and one policy. So the diplomat should stick to its policy, to its principle and national interest that he is representing for. Sabi niya din na art of government lay in recognizing that negotiation is a continuous process, na dapat daw ang diplomat should have one master and one policy. So it means that the diplomat should stick on its principle and national interest. And also that government is an art that lay in recognizing these interests and acting according to them. So meron tayong government to represent our interest for common good, na yung government na yon dapat ma-recognize kung ano yung makabubuti para sa ating lahat at hindi lang para sa state.
So, diplomatic task. According to the Vienna Convention, the functions of a diplomatic mission include, first, the representation of the sending state in the host state at a level beyond the merely social and ceremonial. State visit. Diba pag sinabing state visit, it's a formal visit by head of state to a foreign country at the invitation of the head of state of that foreign country, with the latter also acting as the official host for the whole duration ng state visit. So, speaking of the host, tinatawag din siyang state receptions. So, state visits, it considered to be the highest expression of friendly bilateral relations between the two sovereign states. So, aside from state visit, there are other less formal visit, and which is called official visit, official working visit, a working visit, and etc. Next, the protection within the host state of the interests of the sending state and its nationals, including their property and shares in firms. So, kung ikaw is the head of a state, you should protect your own state, diba? Lalo na kung alam mo may mga visit sa country mo. Of course, there must be rules and limitations pa rin kahit papano, because you'll never know their interests and intentions in your country. So before, yung mga powerful states, they used these rules against weaker ones to enforce rights of their nationals who had failed to secure justice through local remedies. Pero yun nga, na-diminish yung effectiveness nito, but still meron pa rin namang formal diplomatic protection for individuals and for companies that is matched by growth in compensating mechanisms, wider human rights protection, government to government, and claims settlement and investment protection agreements. So next, the negotiation and signing of agreements with the host state when authorized. So agreements, it's agreements by the state to receive members of a diplomatic mission from a foreign country. And of course, diplomacy is the practice of conducting negotiations between representatives of state or groups so as to influence the decisions and conduct of foreign government through dialogue, of course, negotiations, and other non-violent means. Next, the reporting and gathering of information by all lawful means on conditions and developments in the host country for the sending government. And last, of course, the promotion ng friendly relations between the two states and the furthering of the economic, commercial, cultural, and scientific relations. Yun naman talaga ang isa sa mga purpose ng diplomacy, 'di ba? Being friends and having relations with other countries para mag-grow yung kanya-kanyang bansa. So next is diplomatic missions. So diplomatic missions, alam naman na natin to, it's a representative office of a national government located in another nation's territory. So, merong two main types nito, embassy and consulate. Pag sinabing embassy, usually it is located sa capital city at the destination country. And yung pinaka-main function nito is to deal with all diplomatic government-to-government issues. Consulate, it provides consular services for individuals or businesses. So, other than that, they also provide public services for their nationals, including notary public, providing electoral registration, issuing passports and papers for military, conscription, referring injured or sick nationals to local physicians and lawyers, and ensuring non-discriminatory treatment for those charged with or imprisoned for crimes.
Example of basic diplomatic task. Number 1. Foreign policy. General objectives that serve as a guide for good relationships with other states. It may influence by domestic consideration, policies, and behavior of the state. The second one is trade policy. It refers to regulations and agreements that control import and export to foreign countries. Also, the regulation subsides and tariffs. Development cooperation. It aims to provide assistance to poor or less developed countries by promoting their long-term social and economic human development. International organization consists of countries which promote particular purposes, whether for economy, health, education, or human rights. Public diplomacy. It communicates with public for national interest. It could be done from official representative to private institutions like educational exchange programs or cultural events. It is done by sending a representative for improving country's reputation. And the last one is consular services. Issuance of passports, verifying citizenship, and also those working and traveling abroad. These are the kinds or examples of basic diplomatic tasks.
So, hello po. Ngayon po, ambassador naman po ang ating tatalakayin. So, first, i-define muna natin kung ano nga ba ang ambassador. Ang ambassador ay isa siyang accredited diplomat na sinent ng isang bansa para i-represent o maging isang official representative ng isang foreign country. So, kadalasan ang ambassador ay tinatawag din na ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary. Itong title na to is naging superior siya, one time naging superior siya para maging isang status. At so dito mapag-aral na natin kung ano ang ginagawa ng isang ambassador. So ambassador is charged with carrying out all the tasks of the diplomatic mission through subordinates or through personal intervention with local authorities when necessary. And one of the key tasks is to predict a developing crisis, advise and warn. ambassador is also tasked to predict the crisis by gathering information and use it to see the pattern of the situation and its implication. So, yung ambassador is kasama siya sa isang diplomatic mission. Ano nga ba ang diplomatic mission? Yung diplomatic mission, ini-establish siya sa isang capital ng state. Example dito is, kunyari is, dumating sa bansang Pilipinas si Ambassador Gio Tomioka ng Japan. So, dito gagawin yun sa Maynila. Kasi Manila is the capital ng Philippines sa Manila. So, pagdating niya dito sa Pilipinas, kailangan niya mag-present ng kanyang letter of credence. Yung credentials niya kailangan niyang ipakita sa head of state. So, ang pagkatapos nun is kailangan niya rin i-inform yung foreign affairs na darating siya sa bansang ito para maihanda yung mga gagawing presentation pagdating sa kanya. So, ang isa din ginagawa ng ambassador is yung pakikipag-usap sa presidente ng isang bansa. Yung pag-gather ng information sa mga problemang ganito at pag-resolve din ng mga problem sa mga islands, paggagawa ng mga islands. Please pag-uusapan din nila yon para ma-resolve yung problema na yon. So, dito na po sa susunod, negotiates as instructed and giving advice and warn to his government without distortion about the conversation with host foreign minister. He or she also represents their countries by negotiating trade agreements and treaties on behalf of their country's leader. So, ganyan nga. Example ko pa rin dito is yung ambassador ng Japan na si Gio Tomioka. And so, gagawin sa kanila yung Summer Olympics sa 2021. So, kailangan niyang pumunta ng Pilipinas para sabihan yung presidente na hindi pa ready yung Olympics ngayong taon 2020 kasi nga nagkaroon ng novel coronavirus. So, sasabihan niya yung pupunta siya dito para sa pagsabihan yung si Presidente Duterte na mamumove yung Olympics sa 2021. So, yun din yung maging negotiation nila para maging safe lahat ng mga dadalo sa Olympics at maisaalang-alang ang public health ng bawat sasali doon. At yun lamang po ang ginagawa ng isang ambassador. Salamat po.
Let us now proceed to negotiation in Minister of Foreign Affairs. Negotiation is a complex process leading to agreement based on compromise if it reaches agreement at all. It is a complex process because dealing with other state is quite hard because of differences. It is also responsible for mutual understanding despite of these differences. Topic of negotiation and timing of initial overtures are set by the ambassador foreign ministers. Also, the topic to be discussed must be aware by both countries for them to be prepared, especially if there's any form of proposal during negotiations. Next is the negotiator must be fully aware of his or her intention for the benefit of both countries. First, he or she must be persuasive because the possible agreement may be beneficial to the country he or she represents. Next is flexible because of different cultures and beliefs that the person he or she will be dealing at. Negotiator must think critically in times of resolving particular problem and convincing other party for both benefit. The other important thing to remember is negotiations vary according to whether the negotiating states are friends or foes, whether they are similar or disparate power. They must be aware how to deal properly depending on person they dealing with, but make sure that during negotiation, there is a respect between other negotiator since they are the representative of other state. such as sense of timing when to use threats, warnings, or concession during negotiations. It is important because it has a great effect in agreement that will happen at the end of negotiation. The diplomatic negotiator must display reliability and credibility. Negotiation, it is one of the fundamental functions of diplomatic mission because it is the vital part of diplomatic mission. It is not just about good relationship, but it is also create benefit for the country you represent. Differences of country must be solving in advance to avoid misunderstanding because it will affect different aspect of the state in international relation.
Hi, ako po si Nerville at ang i-discuss ko po is about sa multilateral and bilateral negotiation. Number 1, what is multilateral negotiation? Pag sinabing multilateral negotiation, from the word itself, multi means marami. It involves more than 2 parties or countries. It also complex because it requires more skills as it will be handles different parties. So ano nga ba ang positive and negative side nitong multilateral negotiation? The positive side of negotiation is it won't be limited to 2 and there were more participatory. Then the negative side is there might be decisions that is not favorable to others. For example, September 10, 2019, China, Japan, and South Korea uphold their multilateral trading system and it support the World Trade Organization. It also promote the fair and non-discriminatory agreement. Next, number 2, bilateral negotiation. Again, from the word itself, bilateral means dalawa. This only involve 2 countries or 2 parties. It also much less complex compared to multilateral because you need to consider 2 parties' views. Negotiation also becomes tough when both parties are much polarized. What is polarized? Polarized means one-sided. For example, they were not willing to compromise or to meet in the middle. Example is the Philippines and South Korea resumed their bilateral free negotiation this September regarding to tariff cuts on specific Philippine exports to Korea, particularly in agricultural products. And yun lang. Maraming salamat sa pakikinig.
If a negotiation succeed, there comes diplomatic agreements. The result is embodied in an international instrument of which there are several types. The first one is treaty, a written agreement between states that is binding on the parties under international law and analogous to a contract in civil law. It is also the most solemn. Treaties are registered at the UN and may be bilateral or multilateral. International organizations also conclude treaties both with individual states and with each other. An example of this is the UN Charter held in 1945. Its goal is to maintain peace and security, also justice and settlement of dispute between nations.
Nations. Momentous opening words of the Great Charter for World Peace. At San Francisco, 200 men and women of 50 nations labored to build an organization that will outlaw war for all time. President Truman attends the last session of this conference, which the whole world has anxiously watched. The President meets many famous guests, among them General Smuts, who is a delegate to that other peace conference at Versailles, and Admiral Nimitz, under whose command British and American ships are hammering at the door to Japan. At the famous Opera House, the assembled delegates hear a call for their final vote from the chief of the British delegation, Lord Halifax.
And it is now my duty, my honor and my privilege in the chair to call for a vote on the approval of the Charter of the United Nations.
Nation by nation, the delegates cast their votes. 50 peoples pledged to peace. Now the final signing of the Charter. For Britain, Lord Halifax.
The next one is convention. A convention is a multilateral instrument of lawmaking, codifying, or regulatory nature. Conventions are usually negotiated under international entities or a conference of states. The UN and its agencies negotiate many conventions, as does the Council of Europe. An example of this is the Vienna Convention, in which you can see in the picture, which foreign relations and diplomats conduct their duties without threat to influence by the influence host government. The last one is the ratification. It is an executive act of final approval. Note that treaties and conventions require ratification. In democratic countries, parliamentary approval is deemed advisable for important treaties. To sum up, diplomatic agreements can be bilateral or multilateral. They are negotiated between governments or government departments, though sometimes non-governmental entities are involved.
So we're going to tackle about diplomatic personnel. So the definition of this is diplomats and consular personnel are foreigners working under diplomatic permits for foreign embassies or consulates, which is established in a receiving country, and also citizens traveling under diplomatic passports in order to work in their country's embassies or consulates abroad, or in order to return from a posting abroad. So ang isang tao hindi basta-basta nagiging diplomatic personnel. You will going to undergo a rigorous selection and training before representing their country abroad. So, meron akong nabasa na qualifications ng para maging isang diplomatic personnel. First, you should be a university graduate rather. So, magkakaroon ka ng written and oral examinations kung saan sinasabi nila na kakaunti lang ang nakakasurvive. So, yung exam na yon, they are led by the foreign minister who is usually a member of the cabinet or dominant political body. So, yung foreign minister, they're organized both geographically and functionally. So, yan, meron silang tindag na geographic division. So, the functional departments, it includes administration, personnel, finances, economic affairs, legal affairs, archives, and perhaps offices dealing with science, discernments, narcotic, and cultural diplomacy. So, yung diplomatic personnel, nagkakaroon lang ng diplomats, which is usually deployed only in states with which their countries have diplomatic relations. So, yun, yung geographic division, they are generally by region, subdivided into the country, thus that deal with accredited embassies and their own missions abroad. So, yun, all in all, yung diplomatic personnel, they do the function with the country who have relations with their country. So, that's all.